We'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast was recorded, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to elders past and present. Jelena's story contains discussions of child abuse, domestic violence and suicide. If this raises any issues for you, support is available through the links and phone numbers in the show notes.
It's 1999 and the biggest event in tennis is just about to start. We're at Wimbledon, Court 1, ready for the match. 18-year-old Swiss star Martina Hingis is the current world number one. Her opponent is world number 129, 16-year-old Jelena Dokic. Despite the 128 places between their rankings, in just under an hour, Jelena wins 11 straight games, shocking Wimbledon and taking home a career-defining victory. It will go down in history as the first time the women's number one loses to a qualifier at Wimbledon. But this immense success won't change what happens when Jelena goes home. It will be another 10 years before she feels ready to share this painful secret. I'm Matt Middleton, you're listening to Head Game. Today, the story of overcoming adversity, poverty, and abuse to rise to the top. Jelena, welcome to Head Game. Thank you for coming on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's an honour.
Talk to me about how you first got into tennis. How did you realise that you were that was your passion? Because in order to operate at the elite level that you did, surely there's got to be passion there from the off.
Absolutely. Tennis is something that I absolutely love, and I loved it from the very first moment that I stepped foot on a tennis court and hit the very first ball that I ever did. So I got into tennis. I was 6 years old. My father bought me my very first tennis racket. He was inspired by Monica Seles and Steffi Graf, the two of the greats of the game. And in fact, he watched the 1989 French Open semi-final between the two, and that was in May. And from there, he decided to get me a racket. He thought it was actually a really good sport, especially for girls and for development. And that's kind of the way that it started. And from what I kind of know was that he saw that I had really good hand-eye coordination very early on. I was always actually quite competitive and quite energetic even before that in preschool. So he kind of felt like I needed to get a bit of that energy out, and sport was a perfect way to do it. And tennis was an amazing sport for me because it's so individual and competitive, and that's what I am. And in a way, I do love the team competitions when we had it in tennis, but I like that responsibility of having everything fall on me, whether it's the good, the bad, the winning, the losing. And I think he saw that and he had the feeling for that. And absolutely, a big passion of mine from the very first day to today, and it always will be. Tennis is something that I absolutely love, and despite a lot of the ups and downs, it has given me a life and an opportunity that I never would have really had otherwise.
Absolutely. And your relationship with Australia, where did that all start?
So I was actually born in former Yugoslavia, which is now Croatia. And I was born in 1983, but as an 8-year-old, the war erupted in 1991. So we actually had to move out of Croatia into neighbouring Serbia. That was not affected by the war, but we were refugees. We left with 2 plastic bags and my 2 tennis rackets. And we actually thought...
Wait, you left with 2 plastic bags and your 2 tennis rackets?
Yes, yeah. So
wow, you weren't leaving without them, right?
No, I was not leaving without them. But whatever fit in 2 plastic bags. My brother was actually 3 months old at the time, so we moved in June. He was born in March. So he was 3 months old. We left. We actually thought that things would settle down, that it was just tensions and that we would be back within a few months. And we never went back. Things just got worse. It was a horrific war. And it was also because my father was really Serbian oriented. My mother was Croatian, so that was also a very difficult part of it as well. And we came to Serbia as refugees. We had nothing. We lived in a shed that was infested with rats. We didn't have anything to eat. Very often we went hungry, no heating, very limited water. And my brother was 3 months old. That's why I, to this day, say I was so protective of him, and I always used to hold him. And no matter what happened, I was never going to let go of him, because as an 8-year-old, even though you're so young, you're already so aware of what's going on in a moment like that, when you're actually in a war or when you're a refugee. You learn very quickly what's going on as well. And
your brain is like a sponge at that age as well, isn't it? You're absorbing everything. You're taking everything in. Yeah. You know, you're so aware of what's going on without being, I suppose, without having the capability to be able to explain it or to get it across. But it's certainly absorbing, isn't it? It's certainly in there somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw my first dead body when I was 8, just a few days before we actually left Croatia. So it is a shock to the system, but you have to adapt and adjust so quickly, even as an 8-year-old. So we got to Serbia. I continued to play tennis. I was really good already in Croatia, but I had a really kind of natural talent for the game, even very early on. And I was such a great competitor, and I was a fighter on the court, and I had this incredible focus and intensity to be able to still play tennis and do what I needed to do, no matter what was going on the outside. Mm-hmm. And but another big thing that was actually going on for me was the fact that my father was so abusive. So my father was really abusive physically, emotionally, mentally as well. From when I started playing tennis, the very, very first day I started playing tennis and hit that very first ball, my father beat me. And it never stopped from there. Things were never the same again. But up until that point, he never touched me. There was never a hair missing off my head. I actually had some, pretty good memories with my father. So there was a lot going on, but I continued to play well. And I got this opportunity as a 10-year-old for me to go to Germany, because I was winning everything. I won all the nationals. But because of the war and the borders being closed, we couldn't get visas. And my father had an auntie who lived in Sydney, and we were able to get a refugee status because of the war and get a permanent visa to Australia. So as an 11-year-old, together with my family, we moved to Australia in 94, and that's how my story with Australia starts.
And do you think, going back to what you've just said there, you said your father didn't lay a finger on you when until you started playing tennis. Was that a prominent moment in your life? Do you remember that moment when your father started turning physical and you were like, wow, this has never happened before? Why is this happening? Is that a vivid memory in your head?
It is. I think we all have sometimes when you go through things and adversity, and I say trauma, yes, some of those things and some of those moments stay with you. And for me, that one did, because it was such a shock. And I remember he pulled my hair and my ears, and I got beaten with a shoe on the head. And I remember crying to this day. I was so red. I can almost feel how hot I was in the face and what a shock it was. And I actually also, after one of my first beatings, he left the apartment, and literally a minute later, I went to call my mum because I wanted to call her, and I was crying and tell her what happened. And I think he suspected what I was going to do. And a minute later, he walks through the door, and I'm on the phone crying to my mum. And then I got obviously beaten again for that. And that was my first sign of stay silent, never say anything, or else. That stayed with me forever.
So that moment onwards, you keep your mouth shut. Yeah. Do you go out of your way to please your father at this stage, to obviously, keep him on side so you don't get beaten, so you don't have to go through these horrific experiences, just to play tennis? Was tennis at the forefront of everything that you wanted to do, and you thought, you know what, behind the scenes, I'll just stay quiet and just get on with my life. There's not much I can do. And also, did you use your brother as a safety blanket? Was your brother there? Did that take your mind off of things? Moving forward and concentrating on what you wanted to do? Yeah,
for me it was all about tennis, because I knew how motivated my father was for me to succeed. He saw me and he saw the talent, but then he saw it as a way out for the family, because we didn't have very much, and I've come out of poverty. So he saw that as a way for me to create a better life for the whole family, especially once the war erupted. And so for me, it was constantly, okay, I just got to keep working hard and training hard, but also continue to improve and continue to win. And he puts a lot of pressure on you, especially as a young kid, because if you don't, it's not just about the loss, but it's about the consequences. And for me, they were getting worse and worse and worse. But yeah, I had this ability to zone in, and a lot of the time I wouldn't even do anything wrong and he would still beat me. And later on, he actually confessed that that's what he did, just so that he keeps me on my toes, so that he knows or that I know that I always have to be 150%, and even then it might not be enough. So later on, that actually caused...
It's controlling you.
It is.
Controlling you from day dot, basically.
Yeah, but it's also unbelievable how much damage that does to you as a person, because later on it really cost me in life, because I felt like everything I did was not enough. You feel like you want to be perfect all the time, and even then it's not enough. And it's a very difficult mindset because it's almost unattainable. And it was very, very destructive for me as well. But yeah, I continued to work hard. I was always a hard worker as well. My brother, for me, that was always, I didn't want him to get abused, and he was 8 years younger. That's a big difference when you're an 11, 12, 13-year-old. So I was always very, very protective of him, and he never got abused by my father, because it's quite a cultural and generational thing, especially from where I come from and where I was born, because in a way that is how you were treating women, and that is that cultural thing of that's the way you're supposed to do things, and it's normal basically to do that. And my life, it became normal in my life to be almost beaten daily. But the problem that was, and what was going on, it was getting worse. And my father, actually, when we got to Australia, he started drinking. So he actually, he was an alcoholic who got worse and worse, became violent. He was very unhappy that we had to leave, basically, home, and he was very unhappy in Australia, and I paid the price for it. And it was tough to be called, at 11 or 12 or 13 vile names, and sometimes some of those words for me, I would even say, have hurt more than the actual physical abuse.
Beatings.
Yeah, because to hear words like that you're not just dumb or that you are a hopeless cow, but to hear that you're a whore at 12 years of age, that really hurt me and affected me and even my self-worth. And the beatings as well, my worst ones that I still remember to this day. In fact, it's such a subconscious, or even a conscious thing today. I can't wear belts, for example. It's very difficult for me to do so because I was beaten with a belt. That was his biggest thing. And sometimes my back would be covered in bruises and I would be bleeding. He would kick me and punch me and pull my hair and my ears. I still, to this day, he would kick my shins so hard with really sharp shoes that I have dents in my shins to this day. So this is what I was dealing with off the court. Then you have to kind of come out, put a brave face on, and be on the court as well. And then come to a new country. I didn't speak a word of English, and I was bullied at school and in the tennis community as well. So,
wow.
Yeah, all at once.
So this was almost something that you become accustomed to, that you got used to. Like you said, it was the norm. So when you say, it's interesting because when you said that, as a tennis player, you were a fighter, it's almost that you brought that fighting element of survival into your tennis game, which ultimately, I'm not saying, it's right, but ultimately that's why you were such a fierce tennis player. You're so passionate. You were such a fighter you didn't accept loss. You would go hell for leather until the very last point. That's what you're known for. So I suppose merging the two together got you to ultimately to where you needed to be. But when do you remember the first time that you actually won a game or a tournament and you thought to yourself, this is my career? This, I know that I'm good at tennis. I know that I can go far in this world. Let's give it a bash. Let's go.
I always, interestingly enough, even though, you're living in this home that's filled with violence, family violence, which has has a big effect on you because you lose a lot of that self-belief and that worth because you're constantly being put down and even blamed for things that are sometimes like not even your fault or not happening. And it's very hard to live in a home like that that's so negative and toxic. But for me, I, at the same time, had so much belief in myself somehow. It might sound like it's a little bit contradicting, but whatever then I would go and do, I would believe that I can do it and get out of it. So for me...
But you had to be like that, I suppose, because no one else believed in you. Everyone was putting you down. Everyone was dragging you down. The norm for you was you were a useless, worthless piece of rubbish. So ultimately, if you started to believe that, then you probably wouldn't be here today. So I suspect that was a huge right. I've got to believe in myself. I'm the only one here that's going to do that. I've got to believe in myself. And your tennis, ultimately, because you were so good at it and passionate about it and successful at it, that was probably your escape, really. You know, that was going from this childhood where you just wanted to forget to actually get me out on the court. Let me exercise these demons. Let me do what I love doing, where I actually believe in myself.
You're right. And as much as tennis brought a lot of pressure with it and obviously potentially violence on almost a daily basis, yes, it was my place to go out and go, okay, this is mine. I'm going to go out, give it my all. It was my passion, and that's where I could almost let a lot of even the fear out, I guess. And that's where I feel like it's so important to have that meaning and purpose in life. And I really believe that to this day, if I didn't have it, I probably wouldn't be here. And for me, you asked about that moment, maybe where I kind of thought, oh, maybe I could be a tennis player. For me, I was always playing the nationals, and I always played a couple of age groups above, and I would still win. So I was like, oh, okay, I'm pretty good. I'm beating people that are older than me as well. But I would say in '98, I won the US Open girls singles title, and that got me to number 1 in the world in juniors, and I barely lost a match that year. And for me, that was like, okay, this, maybe I am pretty good at this thing. The next level is to play the pros. And yeah, maybe that was kind of the turning point, because it's always really tough to go from juniors to professional. And only, a couple of months later after that, I had some really, really big results on the Pro Tour, including the win against Hingis to get to the quarterfinals of Wimbledon. So, yeah, I think that was probably a turning point when it comes to my belief and going, okay, I might have a shot here. Yeah.
It's amazing because you say, you won the juniors at 98, number 1 in the world, and then you hit the pros in 99. So Wimbledon comes along. Were you shocked? I'm not saying that you qualified for Wimbledon. And take me back to that moment when you're preparing for that and when you're going through that, and then we'll talk about the Martina Hingis upset after that. So when do you get the call up? How does it work? And this is for the viewers and for the listeners. So you're number 1 in the world juniors, and then do you get called forward to participate in the or do you naturally qualify?
So I already played a couple of smaller professional tournaments where I already had some points, because I go into Wimbledon ranked 129. But actually, for 5 months before that, I with your someone you might know, Mark Philippoussis, who was on the show.
Yes. I love Mark.
Yeah, we won the Hopman Cup, and for Australia, the first time ever that Australia won that team's event, and that got me a wild card into the Australian Open 2 weeks later, and I got to the 3rd round as a 15-year-old. So I actually had some points, and my ranking was at 129 in the world, but it wasn't enough to get direct entry into Wimbledon, because only usually cutoff is around 110, 115, so I was close. But I played qualifying, and I qualified at Wimbledon, and that was big, because qualifying and winning...
That's huge, not big. That's huge. You're like 15, 16, tipping the 16 scale.
Yeah.
And you're qualifying for Wimbledon, which is the ultimate tournament. I love the US Open. But Wimbledon, there's just something special about that. All eyes are on Wimbledon. All eyes are on you. You're 16 years old. You qualify. You break through. You're on court 1, and you're just about to take on the number 1 in the world, which is Martina Hingis. What was going through your mind when that card was drawn? When that sort of is like, you are going against the number 1 right now.
Well, someone came after I qualified. A couple of hours later, the draw was done, and we were still on site at the where I just qualified. And someone came to us and said, "You're playing Martina Hingis," and I thought it was a joke. And they said, "No, really,
Carl.
you're drawn to play Martina Hingis," and I was like, "Okay, all right." All of a sudden.
Do you think there's my tournament over?
Yeah, no, but all of a sudden you go from qualifying to going, oh, okay, that's a bit of a,
Bit of a segue.
Yeah, but that's kind of like, sometimes you go, okay, you want to maybe have an easier match, or not easy. There's no easy matches, but if you're going to play anyone, you want to avoid playing the world number one. But for me, I don't know. It was all about the occasion, and I knew it would be a big court. Wimbledon was special. There was so much history and tradition, and this is what I dreamed of. And this is what I dreamed of growing up in Australia. And I took it as, yes, of course, I believe that we all, have fear. You always do.
Of course.
And I kind of almost say, if you're not nervous and don't have fear, something's wrong with you. We all do.
True.
Yeah, we all do.
True.
No matter what we do, whether it's sport or something else. But it's about how you get over that fear or how you respond to
Harness it.
Yeah, how you respond to it, how you use it, and how then you perform under pressure and when you do have fear. And I kind of looked at it as this kind of opportunity of going out there and going, okay, I'm going to give it my best. I already knew Martina a little bit. We practiced a little bit. I played her once already. And I kind of said, look, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to give it my all. And that is the self-belief I come back to, because I remember walking out on that court and I actually believed I could beat her. And that's very, even now, hard to believe.
Love that.
Yeah, but the one thing that I always somehow had was the belief in myself that I can actually get to the other side. Doesn't mean you always will, but
overcome.
Yeah. But if you walk out on the court, or even before you've walked out, and you don't actually believe that you can win no matter who you play, you've already lost. So you've already lost before you've even walked out on the court. And I believe in life, it's the same thing. You really do have to believe that you're capable of anything. And
if you plant that seed of doubt before you go something like that, then you only have to lose a point, and that seed grows, right? Get rid of that seed of doubt from the off, because the moment you plant it yourself, which we do, and then things start to go slightly wrong, that magnifies, and then like you said, before you know it, there's no point in even being on the court. If you go out there with that seed of doubt, you're done. And it's the same with any elite, I would say, any elite sort of environment, is you have to have that self-belief. You have to believe that you are going to, like you said, come through the other side, get through it, or potentially win. That's a huge part, I think, in I don't say an elite mindset, but if you want to be self-successful, then you've got to get rid of that seed of doubt.
Yeah, and even when I got into a position to actually win that match, and many other in my career, and if I didn't actually still believe, like, you're set up against the world number one, and how many times have we seen where people get close to winning, but they just can't get over that line? And for me, why I think that happens a lot of the time is that they don't have that belief, and it happens a lot. So you really have to have the belief, if you even get in that position, okay, I'm going to finish this off. It's not about who I'm playing on the other side of the court. And I could really connect that to a lot of the things that we do in life, whether you're going for a new career, a new job, whether you're going through adversity, whether a lot of the things that you've been through as well, that others go through, that maybe I've been through. You got to believe that you're going to be able to get through it. There's no doubt. I've had many moments after that where things got even worse. But if I didn't believe that I can make it, and to be honest, even to stay alive and be here today, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And that's something I've always been able to get through, even at my lowest moments and worst moments in life. That's what got me through.
And can you remember that winning point against Martina? And tell me not only the winning point, but I see it so many times, and I know it all too well myself. But where tennis players drop to their knees, are so elated because the pressure is so much. The stress, the anxiety, you're in a pressure cooker. Then all of a sudden, and it's not released slowly, you win that final point. It's like the top blows off of it. What was it like winning that final point, and how did you feel instantly after that?
It was incredible, because there was so much, you talk about that relief, for example, which I had in that moment, because I was like, oh my God, it's over, but I've actually won. And you have so much happiness. But then this was the thing for me, and this is what I am all for. For example, this tough mindset and being this, tough fighter, and I'm all about discipline. But what crushed me was that I looked over at my boxer and my father, and he was already walking off the court. Like his back.
It's your coach.
Yes.
Your father's your coach, right?
So his back was turned. He was already gone. He was like nothing happened. And to this day, I'm still very proud of that win, and I'm very happy. But there's always something negative that goes with that certain kind of win or success. Mm-hmm. And that is where I think it's very, very important to draw the line between abuse and discipline and hard work and so on, and being tough, where it can actually get to a point of being really damaging to another person. And it's not even about acknowledgement all the time or about constantly getting that reassurance, but you got to have a little bit of that something that gives you, okay, I've worked so hard for this, and at least that you can enjoy it for a second. And for me, that was crushing. That was heartbreaking. And while that was a massive win and a life and career changing at the same time, it was life changing when it comes to my personal life and my relationship with my father and my family and everything that was going to happen from there, because I saw I'm never going to make him happy and I'm never going to get any acknowledgement from him, because I've just beaten the world number one in the first round of Wimbledon as a 16-year-old, and it's not enough.
Wow, that's so important what you just said there. If your coach, your father can't be happy that you've just ultimately not won Wimbledon, but you've just beaten the number one at such a young age, at the age of 16, you're elated, you turn around and you look for approval. And it is a sense of approval, but just like all that hard work, and he's walking off but he's taken that moment from you straight away. So it's gone from elation to joy all of a sudden to, wow, what can I do to please this man? There's absolutely nothing I can do. So from that moment onwards, you walk off and into the changing rooms, I suppose. What's the atmosphere like with your father, your coach?
Almost as if nothing happened. I just remember him saying, I told you can do it. And that was it, which he kind of did say the day before, but that was it. And for me, that really set the tone, even though I'd already been abused at that point for 10 years, quite badly, that things were only actually probably going to get worse.
Get worse.
Yeah. Get worse. And
the writing's on the wall there, and it's amazing that you've broken it down like that, Jelena. And I'm sorry for butting in, but it's exactly how I would think, and exactly how I've seen things in life as well. That moment, wow, which is, again, like you say, a career-changing moment. It's as you as a tennis player, as a person as well. And then from that moment, instead of thinking things are only going to get better from here on in, actually, things are only going to get worse.
Yeah, and that's why I'm such a, for example, big advocate today against child abuse and domestic violence and a lot of the things that a lot of people go through. And I said to you, I watch SS and everything that you guys do. I have so much admiration, and you're so tough, and I've grown up that way, so I understand it. But even you, and you're so tough, you go, when they do something, you go, well done, mate, or well done.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
I
exactly.
didn't even,
a little wink, a little nudge.
Or something, just a little bit.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
It's an acknowledgement to go, do you know what? Good on you. It's just like, you, listen, through all this hardship and suffering, listen, there is a way out, there is a way through. And do you know what? You're proving the route, you're proving the way. Just that little nod. And that's exactly what we do on SAS.
And that's the thing, and that's the thing I never got important. Once. It's so important because I feel like if I got it maybe just once or twice, it would have made everything different. And that's what I say to parents. Look, I always draw the line at abuse, but even when you're tough, it's got to be a balance. I'm all for discipline and hard work and this really strong mindset. And let's be honest, to be an elite professional athlete and so many other fields in life, it's tough. It's not easy. You got to have a bit of that toughness and be a fighter, but there is a balance, and he didn't have that. And it was tough. It was detrimental to me. And actually, that's what I always say. People think that having extremely abusive or tough parents, that's the way to success. But if you actually look at it, people that have been unbelievably successful, especially in sport, they have had that discipline and hard work, but they've had a lot of support on the side.
Absolutely.
In a very, still not in a just a support that always knew, listen, I've got your back, and we support you. Go and do what you need to do.
So how does it change thereafter? So you win. This is huge. All of a sudden, your name is everywhere. Mm-hmm. From that moment onwards, obviously, even more pressure on your shoulders, even more stress and anxiety because the whole world is now descending on you. Mm-hmm. How do you cope with that moving forward, and how did you cope with it?
I never really had, to be honest with you, an issue with that kind of pressure and expectation. I actually thrived on it. I embraced it. And I looked at it as something, okay, well, I must be in a position, I must be doing something right here when you've got the eyes of the world on you, and you're doing something that not a lot of people get to do in the world. And I embraced that. I really was grateful for that, because I knew that, you go from a place of war and you see so much, and all of a sudden here I'm on the world stage and I get to do something that I love. And I always felt like pressure was pretty much a privilege, and that's the way I looked at it. The issue was that things were unraveling and getting worse behind closed doors. And I talk about that Wimbledon getting to the quarterfinals, and my father, obviously not being satisfied. Well, next year, and I'll continue to rise up the rankings, but I get to the semi-finals of Wimbledon. So I go even one better at 17, which is a massive result either way. But especially when you've come from where I've come from, and now to be able to have results like that. But after that, he thought that was such a disgraceful result, semi-finalist at Wimbledon at 17, that I was not allowed to come back home or come back to the hotel that night. So...
Wait. Well, sorry, you get to the semi-finals a year later of Wimbledon. Yeah. So you do one better. You've beaten Martina Hingis. You get to the quarterfinals, the 16-year-old. Next year, semi-finals. You lose the semi-finals, and you're not allowed back to your father. Your coach tells you that you're not allowed back to your hotel.
Yes, so I couldn't find him after the match. But I do reach him on the phone.
Oh, so he didn't even tell you?
No,
he disappeared.
Left, right? So he completely left. So the silver lining, in a way, was, well, I wasn't going to get a beating that day. But here I am, a semi-finalist at Wimbledon, sitting in the middle of the players' lounge, in tears, talking to my father on the phone, who says that I'm a disgrace, that I'm an embarrassment to him and the family because I lost in the semi-finals of Wimbledon to a world number one as well. And says that I'm not allowed to come back to the hotel and to find my own way, do whatever I want, sleep on the street, because I'm not coming back.
What did you do?
So I stayed at Wimbledon. We finished late afternoon. I waited for everyone to leave, and I hid in a corner of the players' lounge for everyone to leave to be able to stay there for the night and sleep. So they found me in the middle of the night because the cleaners were cleaning out the place late at night, early into the morning. I was just hoping no one finds me because I just wanted to get through the night, and I thought maybe he will calm down, and then in the morning I'll just, as soon as everything opens, I'll get out or I'll try and reach him and see if he's calmed down. And the cleaner finds me. She was a lovely lady, and she just said, look, I can't, I have to alert people. I can't let you sleep here, and I can't let you be here. No one's allowed to be here. So they did. They called the tournament, alerted the tournament what was going on. They very quickly figured out what it was and called around to see who would be able to take me in until the following morning for me to be able to have somewhere to sleep for the night.
Did this take you back to the moment where you beat Martina Hingis? You look around, you see the back of your father walking off, doesn't care. The year later, you're a semi-finalist. That is huge for your age. That's huge for the sport. That's huge for your country. That's huge for you. Mm-hmm. And he turns his back on you again, but this time leaves you completely out to dry and to fend for yourself. What's going through your head at this stage? Are you thinking to yourself, I need to get this person out of my life?
I knew after the Hingis win things were going to get worse, and they did. So I should probably be learning how to deal with media and get media training and sponsors and so on. And here I am dealing with an extremely abusive but also an alcoholic father. And I was actually starting to feel like I was the responsible one and like I was the parent. Now, why I say that is because his drinking was so bad that after some matches and some tournaments, I would have to carry him back to the hotel and just escape from tournaments and during the day and get in the car and get him in bed. And he wouldn't remember things the next day. And after that Wimbledon, a month later, I had one of the worst beatings I ever had where I lost a match. I actually played a really good match. It was over 3 hours. And I actually ended up losing this match, but he beat me so hard after this, and he kicked me in the head and punched me in the head so hard that it left me unconscious. And from that beating, I still actually have on my shins, I have bumps and I have injuries from how hard he kicked me while I had to just stand up straight and not move. And he went on all night. And there was an incident a couple of weeks later at the US Open where he was extremely drunk and I had to carry him home. And here I was not just getting abused, I was so scared of him as well because he was a really scary figure. I felt like also...
Were you petrified of him?
Absolutely.
Were you absolutely petrified? And you'd still be, at this stage, you'd still do anything to keep the peace. You'd still do anything just to keep him off your back, right?
Absolutely, and not just mine. Let's not forget I had a brother who was 8 years younger. I had a mother at home. She used to get abused by him, but nowhere near like I was, even though she had she supported him. But I felt like everything was kind of dependent on me, and was I going to let my family down as well? So I kind of felt like I had the world on my shoulders, but it had nothing to do actually with having the pressure and expectation and the world watching me play tennis, which was at this point nothing compared to what I was going through off the court. But also for me, what kind of actually really, that was the kind of the last straw was the fact that he was starting to unravel publicly and he was ruining my reputation. People didn't look at me anymore as this tennis player that they loved to watch and this girl that came through and that had so much love and passion on the court and that was a fighter. My reputation was being ruined by him and I couldn't turn that around, and especially at the time media fed on it. He was a headline and a joke and a punchline, which was so hard to take because I could not understand why they didn't just stop for a second to go, look, there's something clearly wrong here with this guy, to underage children going home with this person. This is not, something doesn't look right here. So everything, I felt like my whole world was unraveling now, both publicly and privately. And I decided to escape home. I was 19 and it was crushing for me, even more than the fear, which I had so much of. Even 10 years later after that, I was still so afraid of him. I sometimes thought if I see him somewhere or around the corner, I would be petrified. And I decided to escape. I did it at a tournament at 2:00 in the morning. And for me, what was crushing though is I felt like I was letting my whole family down. I felt like I was a traitor. I felt like I wasn't loyal. That's what he used to also tell me as well. But for me, it was like, okay, I'm doing this thing where I know it's the right thing to do. I need to get away from this person. He's extremely abusive, toxic, and who knows if I'll even end up alive in a year or two. But at the same time, my heart was broken because I was leaving my brother and my family, and I felt like I was this really a traitor and a disappointment to everyone.
Do you know what really gets me is looking at you and hearing your story and I'm sure you've asked this yourself, but you're super positive in your approach of moving forward. How far would you have got if you had that support behind you? And that really, I get quite emotional thinking about it because it really upsets me because, I see a phenomenal talent that just, your world could have been a whole different world.
Look, for sure, if nothing else, the longevity of my career would have been there, and I would have played at a really high level for a very long time and a lot longer. And a lot of people say a lot better, maybe even a Grand Slam champion. But and I did think about this for a very long time, and it used to upset me. But you know what? That's kind of all a what if. I kind of felt like, I feel like now, listen, this is the cards I've been dealt in life. And everyone's world is different. And for me, it didn't matter anymore because I was at a stage where and I didn't realise it at the time, but it unravelled in the next few years after I left home, where my mental health was so affected. I was such a traumatised, still young person who had PTSD, who had depression, who had anxiety. Later on, I would find out even traits of borderline personality disorder because of everything that I went through, that this was now a battle to not just stay alive, but if I do stay alive, to actually live a normal life one day. That is how extreme it got. Because once I left home, it continued. His terrorising continued. He would show up at tournaments. I had to hire around-the-clock security with me at tournaments to make sure I was safe.
This was after you got rid of him,
yes.
Right? So you get rid of him. How do you feel when... So take me back to the first tournament without your coach, without your father there. Is there a sense of relief? Is there a sense of... Or are you always looking over your shoulder knowing that, he's going to pop up...
It's fear.
When least expected.
Yeah, it's fear and terror. There's no relief.
There's no relief. So your first tournament, you got a new coach. It's just you're still laden with fear and terror.
Yeah. Well, when you're in domestic violence or family violence situations, or even abusive relationships, leaving is just as hard as being in it, because you are so petrified. You're so afraid of this person. You're waiting for them to show up around the corner. I could not sleep for years properly. I had nightmares. I remember my long-term partner at one stage when I did leave, this was even for a few years after, every time he would lift his hand or something, I would duck because it was an automatic reaction to me being hit all the time. So it continued on, and the problem was that he wasn't going to stop. So his calls or his messages were showing up because in a way he wasn't actually really doing anything illegal, right? So I had to take care of that and how I deal with it from there. So while I was still winning matches, tennis was not.
Yeah, you were. That's the fascinating part, right? Because you were going through this and you were still winning. Right.
And tennis was the last thing on my mind. I would get off a tennis court, whether I was practicing or whether I was playing a match, and I would go, okay, do we know where he is now? And that was what I was doing. And it continued. And he was also, for me, what happened was he was extremely financially abusive as well. So when I left, he had control of everything as well, especially while I was underage. But he gave me a deal. And he said, if you sign over everything right now and some of your future earnings, I will leave you alone. So I did. So
straight away. No questions asked. You were like, if you stick to your part of the deal, I'll give you absolutely everything.
Yes,
I'll start again.
Because all I wanted, I just wanted to get
that
a normal life.
To prove, the life that you were going through.
And I gave him millions, but of course it didn't stop. And the hardest part, though, for me was that my brother had to stay behind with my parents because he was 8 years younger. He was 11 at this point. And my father used him he kind of weaponized that relationship and used him because he didn't allow me to talk to him. He didn't allow me to see him. So at this point, I didn't talk to or see my brother for 8 years. And that is what really crushed me. It was I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about anything. It was these things that meant so much to me that I didn't have anymore. And my mother chose my father's side. So here I was, kind of had to go about it and left alone. And it was starting to take, a really big toll on me mentally, where within 3 years of leaving home, it's actually not a very long time when you think about it, here I was standing on a balcony and almost jumping off a balcony.
How did you get through everything to that moment where you're like, listen, it ends here right now on this balcony, and then you get through it?
You always believe that there's a way out. So even in that moment, when I was standing out on that balcony, and it looked really, enticing for me. I was one step away. For me, that fighting spirit kicked in and said, no, can you do more? And that's what I think my strength is always giving 150%. I did it on the court. I did it off the court. And you always feel like if I've given it my all and there's no more options, okay, I put my hands up. But I felt like, you know what? No.
I've got more to give.
I've got more to give.
There's more to life than this.
And I think it's those 1%ers that you sometimes think, I've fought. But I always go, there's a little bit more left there. And you just never know, that might turn your life around. And that's that self-belief. When I said to you, you walk out against the world number one, you can be walking out against Serena Williams, greatest of all time tomorrow. And she's one of those players that really had that aura and she was intimidating. But you go, you know what, I'm going to step on this court, I'm going to give it my all, I'm going to believe I can win. I might get thrashed, that's okay. But I'm not going to go out there just straight away thinking I'm going to lose. And this is the same thing when I said I connect that to life.
Is that what you've done with your life in that moment?
Yes.
I've got more to my life. I've got more to give. I've got so much more that I can achieve and do. And you know what? I'm not going to let anyone else define me. I'm not going to let any situation. I'm going to define myself. I'm a fighter, and I'm going to fight to the very last breath.
Well, it took still a bit of time after that moment, because another thing why I advocate so hard for with mental health illnesses is that it took me a while to realise that I did have to deal with that part. I couldn't just shove it under the rug and leave it there, right?
Oh, you have to. You have to acknowledge it in order to unpick it and make sense of it, right?
But I didn't know that at the time, but I knew, okay, let's go a step at a time. I'm going to do what I can. But yes, I got to that stage where it was, look, I cannot let this define me or defeat me. And for a long time, even a few years after that, it did. I felt like I was defined and defeated by that past, that's who I was, and also what my story is about, but also who I am as a person. I always kind of knew I'm not like my father. I'm nothing like him, and I could never be like that. I'm completely the opposite. I was always this, especially before the abuse. I remember even as a really young kid, I was this bubbly kid. I had this energy for life, for tennis, for everything I did, for school, for my friends. And here I was, a shell of a person, because I felt like that's what domestic violence does. It just beats you down and you feel like you have no self-worth. And I didn't know yet how I was going to get there, but I felt like, okay, I'm really defined here by that and by him. And I'm, in a way, even defeated. And I was like, okay, it's not all my fault, but at the same time, let's give it something more here. Let's fight. Let's see how I can actually get out of this. And for a very long time, look, I was a victim. I was. There's no doubt about that. But the question was then, okay, I've got to survive this first.
Do I want to live as one?
And then let's see what goes on from there. It took a while, but you know what? It doesn't matter, because a long journey is better than no journey. And I learned so much about myself through all of those ups and downs. I want people to know that the journey to finding yourself and to healing is not all up. It never is in life or anything. And
no, it's not life.
Yeah, it's important to know its ups and downs, highs and lows, wins and losses, but you can learn so much from it. And I learned so much from all my, let's say, failures or mistakes, and even some things that happened to me that I wasn't in control of. It was, okay, let's see how we can turn this into a positive, right? Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I still had some good results, but my career ended early at 29. Because of injuries and because of being really drained mentally. I took a toll on me.
Yeah, mental scars, emotional scars. You talk about injuries, physical injuries, but look at all of those emotional and mental injuries as well. That on top of your physical injuries is, it's hard to
but
pull through,
I had that moment where I was like, you know what, I actually think this is the end for me, that I shouldn't give this a go. But there's a moment where you go, okay, this was my career. I'm ending it at least 5-6 years early, and it's been up and down because of everything. But I kind of was like, okay, I really had something where I had to recognize that was the end. Professional athletes have a really hard time doing that because you feel like a part of you dies when you end something that's been your identity. Yes.
Yeah.
And so what I was like, had to go was battling this thing going, should I play? Should I take a year off but then try again? Should I make a comeback? Should I, is this really done? And I was like, no, it's something was telling me this is it. This is your time with tennis is done, but also this is not your identity. But this was now, okay, let's go. Victim to survivor to thriver, I say, right?
There, listen, that is it. Wow, I'm going to take that and use that for my own. I hope you don't mind. That's amazing.
But, how do you do that when you finish your sport or something that's, let's say, been your identity for a long time? And I had that where I had fear. I was hiding, couldn't even get out of the house to try something. It was an unknown for me. What do I do from here? And this is where I had to go, okay, I need to get outside of my comfort zone. That was one. And I was always good at doing that. But I lost it a little bit along the way with domestic violence and mental health illnesses. But also it was, okay, something's missing here. I need to do something. I've got the weight. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. And I realized the very first sentence that my father said when he beat me the very first time was, don't you dare say anything to anyone. Don't you dare say anything to anyone or I will kill you. And he used to repeat that all the time. And I was like, I had no voice. I was silenced. I had nothing. I never said anything in the media. I never said anything to anyone. And I didn't quite know it at the time, but writing my first book, Unbreakable, that was it. That was the turning point because I was finally telling my story, sharing my story, finding my voice, speaking up. But for me, it was different. I had a platform. I did it through writing, but you can do it with your family, with your friends, with your co-worker, someone, or getting help. I find so much strength in vulnerability. We as athletes and in general in society have this thing that silence is golden, but also that we have to be perfect and that there is this kind of like I had to shatter the myth that we had to be perfect and that silence was golden. And I discovered that with Unbreakable. And I say the day that Unbreakable came out is the best day of my life. And I've said it since. That's 6 years ago now because I got my life back. I wasn't existing anymore.
Oh, you got your voice back.
Yes, but by that, I got my life back.
Yeah, exactly. You got your life back. You got your voice back because now you're a super respected tennis commentator as well. So talk about going back to those very first words of, silencing you, of having no voice. And then your book comes out. It sort of gives you that confidence back. And then all of a sudden your voice is heard throughout the tennis world with huge respect now because you're a tennis commentator. How does it feel being listened to and hugely respected?
It's interesting because if you told me that I would be, commentator, analyst, or on TV and a speaker, which I am as well, but also even 2-time best-selling author, I would go, no way, like you're nuts. First of all, that I would be able to reinvent myself that much to that extent, do things that I never thought I would do, but also they are all things where you have to be so confident, where you have to have a voice, where you have to pretty much get through a lot of fears and pressures, and where you have to be this person that now stands up and believes in themselves. And that was not me. That was not me, 10 years ago. But that's why I feel so strongly about sharing our stories. And it might not be for everyone, but somehow sharing your story and being vulnerable to finding that strength. It takes so much guts to say, I am not okay, or this is what's going on. I need to go get help. So I felt like, okay, this is now, I found my voice, but at the same time, let's go. Let's get out of my comfort zone. Let's see what I'm good at. I have some things I want to do. I have a passion for this and for that, and let's do it. And finding my voice has given me that confidence to be able to talk, to be able to look at people. If you saw me 10 years ago, you would say that person just looks the same. That is not the same person. And that comes through going also, look, tough lessons, going, look, I could let this define me. I could let it defeat me. I could let it destroy me. Or I could, I could build myself back up. I had to go, and I had it for a while. It's just kind of a natural thing. I was a victim. But with Unbreakable, I was like, this is now my survival story, getting my voice back. And I say at the end of Unbreakable, I don't want anyone to pity me. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. This is my life. There's no what ifs. But it's now, okay, how do I rebuild and become this person that I know I can be, that I can be the best version of myself?
When you mentioned that before you started getting beaten by your father at the age of 8, you were a bubbly, confident young girl. And I believe that once our personalities are set in stone like that, we always revert back round to that child, always revert back round to that personality of who we were. Because I was exactly the same. I was always this young, bubbly child, positive child. Then I had to put on a mask and had to, put on this body armor to survive in the military, to do what I'd done. But then I've always come back round to being that super positive, young sort of super positive, sort of motivated individual that I was when I was a youngster. I think you always go back to your purest form, and I can see it within you. Just speaking to you just before, I can see the bubbly side. When you mentioned that young girl, I thought straight away, I can see that. I'm not saying it's fully there, but I can see that. When you say you're confident, I can see that. That personality that we were, I believe that, we go through life and we come back round to the purest form of ourselves. And I've definitely seen that in yourself. So thank you ever so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thank you.
Great lessons identified. I want to see you on my show next, SAS. So listen, I'm coming for you. I'm going to come for you. I'm going to say, look, listen, this is the time. But listen, great lessons identified. You're a phenomenal woman. Talk about mental resilience and emotional intelligence when we look at how we've unpicked things. Thank you so much. You're amazing, and I can't wait to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
My guest today was Jelena Dokic. Thank you so much for joining me on Head Game. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of our incredible stories, and leave me a review wherever you're listening. I'm Ant Middleton. Catch you again next time.